In the dark of night, Dr. John Smith, a gifted surgeon, stood in the operating room. His whole life was bound up with this cold and surgically precise world, or rather, he sought purpose in it. Every evening after finishing his long day, he retired to his office. The walls were decorated with pictures of his patients, their faces expressing pain, suffering, and eventually healing. And every day, as he closed his eyes, he heard their voices in his dreams. They became his companions in his loneliness. One night, an unusual patient was admitted to the emergency room. Her name was Sarah. She was young and beautiful, but her face showed signs of fear and terror. Sarah was a mystery and her story seemed like a nightmare. John decided to have surgery to solve her problem. However, what he discovered during the surgery stunned him. Her organs were unusual, almost otherworldly. Their structure was completely alien. In shock, he finished the operation, but he still couldn't understand what had happened. After the operation, Sarah disappeared as if she had never existed. But the nightmare was just beginning for John. Patients he had previously treated began to return with unimaginable stories. They claimed to feel different, as if something inside them had changed. John realized that Sarah was the key to solving this mystery. He scoured the town, studying old hospital records and archives. He finally found mention of an experimental program that had been conducted at the hospital decades ago. This program involved sinister experiments on patients, and Sarah was one of their creations. After realizing that the patients he was treating were part of this program, John realized that they had been turned into something else, something non-human. He tried to save them, but it was too late. They had been turned into something inexplicable. Their bodies had become part of something larger and sinister. John Smith realized that his role in this horror story was just beginning. He had witnessed the dark side of medicine, and now he would have to confront forces he couldn't even imagine in order to save his town from the nightmare he had awakened. Weeks turned into months, and Dr. John Smith relentlessly continued his research. Each day, his anxiety grew more intense. The deeper he delved into the documents and archives, the clearer it became that the experimental program was part of a non-human research effort to create something beyond reason. John began contacting scientists and specialists across the country, hoping to find answers and ways to save his patients. With them, he tried to reconstruct the ancient experiments and understand what forces had been summoned. They uncovered horrifying details. Patients were subjected to genetic mutations, brain experiments, and other methods that violated the norms of nature. But the deeper they dug, the more dangerous it became. Their research led them to the conclusion that the created entities were beginning to gain consciousness and their own power. They were infiltrating the world of dreams and reality, their essence transforming into unfathomable evil. John realized that he and his team were in the midst of a collision between humanity and something unfathomable. With each new discovery, they were putting themselves in more and more danger. However, John could not back down. He was indebted to his patients who were living victims of this horrible program. He made the decision to confront this evil, no matter how high the cost. But determination shone in his eyes, and he knew that even in the face of such unfathomable things, the human will could be the last hope for salvation. For months, John Smith and his team made desperate attempts to unravel the secrets of this terrible experimental program. Together, they turned to ongoing nightmares, studied the macabre recordings, and tried to decipher their utterly inhuman content. In the course of his research, John discovered a reference to Dr. Malcolm Foster, who was one of the program's chief scientists. There was a hint in his notes that he was working on a demonic theory of the effects of genetics and medicine on the human soul. With the help of his colleagues, John tracked down Dr. Foster and came face to face with him. He turned out to be a man who had lost his mind and turned into a fanatic, convinced that his research had opened the door to another world that had come to attack humanity. Foster claimed that the patients who underwent transformation as part of the program had acquired supernatural powers and were now the embodiment of evil. He claimed that they planned to invade the world of dreams and nightmares to recreate a dark realm. John realized that he would not only have to fight for the lives of his patients, but also for the future of humanity. He returned to his hospital where he met with those who trusted him and announced to them the impending threat. Together, they decided to join forces to fight this evil. The battle was incredibly violent and mystical. John and his team faced patients who had gained supernatural abilities. They were fighting not only for their lives, but for the future of the entire world. Everything they knew was put to the test, and they faced an inhuman threat that was more complex than any surgical procedure. Despite the terror and madness, they fought to their last breath. John Smith realized that his mission had turned into something much bigger than he could have imagined. In the end, they had won, but the price had been incredibly high. Now John Smith and his team had to find a way to bring patients back to life and prevent a new threat lurking in the dark corners of medicine and research.